our two-sentence horror. The doctor didn't believe me when I said I had parasites, so I decided to prove it. I wish he'd stop freaking out about how much blood I'm losing and look at the weird red worms I pulled out of my arm. Despite what the veterinarian said, you bullishly stuck to your beliefs, confident that you knew what was best for your pets. As the cats sniffed weakly at yet another raw vegan meal, you tell yourself you're only imagining the bones jutting visibly beneath their patchy fur. "Okay," I heard Alexa say from the other room, responding to a command. I hadn't spoken, and no one else was home. "That was close," I said, swerving away from oncoming traffic. The cold eyes of my fiancée froze me in place as she reached over and steered us back into the stream of headlights. They say you die once when you stop breathing, and a second time when someone says your name for the last time. Sitting alone in my dilapidated apartment for years now, I realize it's not always in that order. They say we have a primal sense that we can just feel when someone is watching us. It's been a few weeks, and it's clear that you do not have that sense. I look at my father's head on the wall, knowing that he'll finally be proud of me today. Then I look back at the terrified hunter and sink my antlers into his chest.
Last time, Daddy beat me up because I accidentally paid the store clerk more, but this time I will count properly, I thought to myself. I reached into my pocket to get the money, but found nothing but a hole. The painkillers helped after I found out my husband and doctor secretly gave me a husband stitch after the birth of my first child. The pills knocked them both right out, and I used the needle and thread to sew their own stitches into their urethras. I sat in the hospital and tried to focus on the rhythmic beeping of my infant son's heart as I ignored my crazy mother's ranting about government conspiracies. But when I came back later, I heard only silence as my mother smiled and said she unplugged some things to prevent the 5G radiation from spreading.
Returning home from my daughter's funeral, I paused at the front door, sobbing, and begged God to please take away the pain. As I stepped through the door, I paused, confused about where all the unfamiliar toys and clothes strewn about the room had come from. An abandoned asylum is about to be renovated, and the last personnel shut down an antique machine. Before he leaves, he heard a disembodied voice crackled from the intercom. "Thank you for releasing me." "These drills are such bullshit. Schools almost never catch on fire," I groaned. As I hear a loud bang and watch the girl in front of me fall to the ground, I start to question why the principal's voice sounded different when we were told it was just a drill from over the intercom. I walked through the front door to find my wife, blood oozing from jagged slashes in her wrists, and a graphic video of me with another woman playing on the computer screen behind her. As I cradled her body and wept, a new email alert popped up on the screen with the subject, "Hi Shane, we've just sent you a free customized Ultimate Fantasy trademark sample video produced by our cutting-edge generative AI created just using your profile pic." For her surprise birthday party, my psychic friend was going to lure my mother to the basement where the guests were hiding, with a made-up story about sensing a body being buried down there. After a few moments of silence, we heard my mother shout, "You'll never find the other one," followed by the sound of a gunshot. "And the triangle goes in the green hole. Good job, Eva," said Amy, with a proud pat on the back. Turning to the colonel, Amy continued, 3 minutes into training, the model has a 2-year-old spatial ability. In 2 hours, this entire floor of EVAs can be mission capable. When I was a toddler, a drug-addled homeless woman ran up to my father, ripped me from his embrace, and sprinted away. She knew she couldn't physically stop my father from jumping off the overpass, but thanks to her, I didn't die with him. After sex, I always feel guilty. It's difficult to continue the autopsy afterwards. I have to remind myself that I'm the only veterinarian in the city. After my latest failed attempt, I awoke in the hospital to the smiling faces of my family and the doctor saying I was lucky to be alive. As the doctor left the room, all smiles faded, and my mother said, in her typical dismissive tone, "I guess you can't even die right." When the soldiers came into our village, my wife grabbed our newborn son, and I grabbed some valuables as we fled towards the forest. While hiding in the forest, my wife said, "Take this bag and give me the child." "Lips on the tip, Molly," the supervisor snapped her mantra. I always licked the brush before painting each radium watch dial. Today I was just distracted by that damn toothache. After Superman disappeared, some people said that he had gone undercover to expose some organ trafficking ring. But after my retinal transplant, when I was able to use X-ray, telescopic, and microscopic vision, I realized what had happened to him. I scrolled down the terms of service without reading and tapped, "I've read the TOS and agree. I wish I'd seen the clause that legally allowed them to steal the soul from my body." The monk instructed us to not look back as we walked away from the lowering casket. I could hear something trying to sound like my grandmother, begging me to turn around. The ship's crew assured the passengers everything was good. A few hours later, most of the passengers had drowned or frozen to death because there weren't enough lifeboats. For my final meal, they gave me tons of food, anything I wanted and more, and I was glad that at least I wouldn't die hungry. Then they tossed me back in my cell, and they never came back. "Sir, ma'am, I regret to inform you that your son has failed his government-issued IQ test. Due to his scores being in the 99th percentile, under the Equal Intelligence Act, he has been scheduled for an immediate lobotomy. Ever since the superhero has started protecting our city, 99% of women feel safe and secure. The remaining 1% are those women who he takes with him as payment."
"Did you have an affair while you were abroad?" my brother asked when I told him that I might have children outside of my marriage. "Not an affair, but my squad did visit a lot of remote settlements during the war," I replied. I pointed at the candies on the counter asking, "Dad, can I have 4 of those, please?" while my other hand showed 4 fingers. As I curled the 4 fingers around my thumb, I hoped the cashier knew the sign and my dad didn't. In lieu of the death penalty, I was to be sentenced to an experimental drug trial, through which I would be subjected to 1 hour of eternity. I have spent the last 10 billion years staring at the same 4 walls, begging for death but unable to die, and my sentence has not even begun. I looked into the eyes of the dog I abandoned years ago, and I knew he recognized me. As he guided his handler away from my body in the rubble without alerting, I regretted leaving him on the side of the road. The zombie apocalypse ended decades after it began, society creating a cure, until the people emerged from the bunkers, their bodies containing the original strain. "Go home and get some rest," I told my team. "It's nearly midnight, and you'll be no good to those trapped miners if you're working on fumes." The rep from the Army Corps of Engineers had assured me they had enough oxygen to last up to, 200 hours, over 8 days, and it's not like they would starve before morning. I invented a time machine so I could go back in time to change my husband's mind about suicide. When I arrived back in the present, I smiled while reading his obituary, knowing he wouldn't live on to kill all of those innocent people. My favorite comic book, my favorite necklace, the puppy I rescued, my favorite toy, and that's my best friend, my wife said with a smile. With childlike enthusiasm, my wife explained what everything was after we dug up her time capsule. "What is this thing called, Daddy?" squealed my young son, wonder blazing in his little eyes as he pointed excitedly at the figure on the page. As I smiled at his awe and innocence, I bittersweetly replied, "We called those trees, and they used to be everywhere." I think my husband is making me sick. Knowing the fridge has been on the fritz, I probably should have thrown the rest of him away. Searching through the wreckage of another ruined city, I finally got lucky when I found mounds of enough warm white rice to stave off starvation for another day. Shoving a handful into my mouth, I felt the little grains writhe and squirm against my tongue, but I told myself it was just my imagination as I swallowed hard and took another bite. After I was convicted, they put me inside the machine where I would relive my victim's last moments as a punishment. They stopped the machine when they noticed my erection. She was only 16 when they buried her, a few hours older when she died.
When the apocalypse finally arrived, I wondered which common object society would choose to replace our paper currency. Bottle caps, paper clips, and countless other trinkets were trialed, but never in my wildest nightmares did I think we would settle on human eyes. After the food had been eaten, the man grinned gleefully as he waited for the drama to begin. Having only one toilet in a house full of lactose-intolerant people, the revenge for them tricking him into eating meat would be sweet. In order to hide my drinking problem from my family, I've been putting liquor in regular juice. I came out of the bathroom to see my husband helping my toddler finish the last 3/4 of my heavily poured vodka and apple juice. "Finally!" I exclaimed. After 2 long years, my masterpiece is almost complete. It just needs a little bit of red, I thought, standing in front of the canvas with my loaded gun. Is that the venomous one? He asked, clutching his bite. Don't worry, red and yellow, he's your fellow. I love sexual predators, especially pedophiles. No one cares when they end up missing. So nice to enjoy a nap at the beach while he's watching our son, she thought. So nice to enjoy a nap at the beach while she's watching our son, he thought. There is nothing after death, no God, no afterlife, just empty eternity. But don't worry, your existence will continue.
I thought that since I was pregnant now, my husband wouldn't lay his hands on me anymore. I was relieved until I found a notebook detailing every failure I made, beginning the day I told him I was expecting.
As we started to dissect the alien corpse, we marveled at how different yet familiar his body was. What does NASA mean? My colleague asked, examining the faded emblem on the alien's primitive spacesuit. Please don't let it into the baby's room. That's not our dog, shouted the hysterical wife, as a canine's tail disappeared into the hallway behind her. Honey, please calm down. You're not making any sense, soothed her husband. But at that moment, the playful barking that emanated from the nursery began to warp and twist into a hideous laugh. Mommy, baby Jack can swim all by himself, my 4-year-old exclaimed, beaming with pride. He float with his face down, she added, pointing to the pool. I stuffed a pencil up my nose and went to find my girlfriend, knowing it would gross her out. I tripped. I never thought I would miss colors of all the things in this world. Trapped in this room devoid of colors, I feel myself going insane. I've covered the walls with my blood and feces, but they always clean it up when I'm unconscious. You aren't born with a fear of the dark, but most people forget how they got it. I cautiously tell my father, Dad, this food tastes funny, as he brushes the hair away from my ear. His trembling voice whispers, just eat, honey, tears streaming down his face, and I realized the layoff had twisted something deep within him. You're under arrest, the officer told me, putting me in the back of his car. The thoughts of what I was arrested for quickly stopped when I realized that this wasn't the way to the station, and fear soon washed over me when we had stopped in the middle of nowhere. They always said pets would eat you when you died, but when I fell and became paralyzed, I realized you didn't need to be dead. I went to sleep with everyone else, but then, to my surprise, I woke up because I had to pee. There is something wrong with my hibernation pod, I kept screaming from inside, but no one came to open the pod. As the 5 small children sat by their 2 beaming parents, looks of cherubic contentment across their sweet faces, the youngest boy suddenly sneezed. Ruin another take, and you won't eat tonight, snapped his mother, her saintly facade shattering like glass into a familiar look of venom as she moved to readjust the camera. I'm going to open you up, scoop out your insides, and feed them to my pigs, you fucking whore, as I hid in the closet. That was the last intelligible thing I heard my dad shout before the screaming started. I'm so sorry, my wife cries hysterically to the judge. If my sister hadn't lied about having an affair with my husband, I would have never chopped his genitals off. I was collecting eggs during the egg hunt when my guardian angel appeared in a flash. Put it back without touching the pin and leave it for the other kids, she said, pointing at the strange egg I had just picked up. I want to enroll my 9-year-old in pre-ballet classes, but she refuses to learn ballet, I said with frustration. Don't worry, with the new technology, we can change her preferences, and she won't even notice, the doctor said with a smile. When my little sister clawed at her throat and gasped for breath, I started Googling frenetically. She still persisted after I shoved the Wikipedia page in her face and said, "It says here that peanuts aren't nuts, they are legumes." I watched in horror as my coworkers began jumping out of the 14th story window to their deaths before I decided to lock the windows, stopping anyone else from committing suicide. The last few people stared at me as their skin began melting from the fire that had already gotten up the stairs. I've been living in a small room with my friend for my entire life, and today my arms could finally touch both opposite walls. I was happy until my friend told me that arms do not grow longer. I found my son crying after he buried his dog. Next time, before disrespecting me, remember that you have 2 more pets, I said as I walked away. Look what I can do, he sang to the baby, rhythmically snapping his fingers. When he ran out of fingers to snap, he moved on to the boy's wrists. At school last week, I shoved that nerdy kid into a locker. They found him this morning because the hallway was starting to smell. In accordance with the law which states one involuntary death for each new birth, you have been algorithmically chosen for forced euthanasia on April 9th, 24 at 10:45 a.m. Please arrive 15 minutes before your appointment and bring this notice, and don't run. I couldn't believe the man who had raped me was given custody of our newborn daughter. The judge's reasoning was, well, you did try to get rid of her. Where exactly is she? I asked, determined to lose my virginity tonight. Hold your horses, I'm asking again, my friend said, as he handed me the shovel and put the Ouija board on the cemetery ground. The first EMT said, he's got the right blood type and he's listed as an organ donor, worth a shot? The second nodded grimly and replied, for my little girl, absolutely, but we'll have to make it look like we tried. Shouldn't you, give me some Novocaine first or something? I asked nervously, watching the dentist reach for her drill. She fixed me with a stern look as it whirred to life and said, anesthesia is for patients who take care of their teeth. I understand you're in tremendous pain, but try to remember that I will spare your daughter's life if your final words manage to surprise me. With his raw flesh, mostly flayed of skin, even to breathe was shivering agony, but between gasps, he managed to wiggle his toes and say, you missed a spot. I felt like the luckiest man in the world, because not only was my fiancée smart and beautiful, we shared the same values and saved sex for marriage. In our honeymoon suite, I asked her why I still hadn't met her twin, and she said she was always with us right here, and in between her legs was a blinking face with teeth. You are the adopted one, loser, my sibling yelled at me, not knowing because of my illness. My parents got her as a replacement. I've always had aquaphobia, and the only reason why we have a pool is because my husband wanted one, I said, with tears in my eyes. That's what I told the police officer when he asked me why I didn't jump into the backyard pool to save my 2-year-old baby. It was so challenging for me to tell my best friend how awful she was every day for 3 years. But now, as I tuck my new toddlers into their beds, I know what I did was right. After so many empty years, we thought we'd never have a child. So thank you, doctor, quavered the husband. The doctor's futile cries were muffled by duct tape as the wife, gently cradling his infant daughter, pressed a silenced .22 to his forehead and said, we'll take good care of her. With advanced fertility technology, our robots have made parenthood a breeze for married couples, so don't worry about this necessary procedure. Against my will, they put the machine on my lower torso that quickly sliced away the defining parts of my manhood. I was visited by death when I was a child, and it left me devastated. He said that he had no quarrel with my kind, and that he will never darken my doorstep ever again. Everyone I sleep with dies within 7 days. Well, technically only one person lasted a week. The others couldn't handle more than 48 hours of that kind of pain. I noticed a tiny piece of corn stuck between my 9-month-old son's teeth, so I carefully plucked it out. That's when I learned what an exposed nerve looks like. Yesterday, my daughter told us that a kid in her class bit her. Today, we found out that we could no longer see her in the mirror. You left your lunch on the counter again, silly, I said as I left a voicemail on his cell phone. If I had just known that those two were in the school library, maybe they would never have found where he was hiding. In disturbing news, a nanny AI bot had been found pinning a toddler to a bloody bed in Seattle, Washington, while the parents cry a desperate outrage against Home AI Inc. The company states that the parents did not update to the model's much safer datasets, which left it to learn from domestic abuse originating in the home. As I entered the apartment where my friends were holding my kidnapped girlfriend, I chuckled and shouted, "April Fools!" The laughter died in my throat as I turned the corner and saw 2 masked men lying still in a pool of blood with my girlfriend nowhere in sight. The patient begged for more pain meds, but the staff tutted and maintained the same dosage. Across the floor, a nurse tried to remember whose pain meds they had already skimmed from. I flung my phone down angrily after the 5th Face ID not recognized. I glanced in the mirror and screamed. 911, what's your emergency? Just send everyone Don't be mean to other kids, don't steal their stuff, and don't make the teacher mad, I said to my little daughter as we reached the kindergarten. Also, don't show your fangs, don't get exposed to the sun, and don't drink from the other kids, I added. My therapist told me there's no cure for my violent impulses, so I might as well put them to good use. He suggested I volunteer at an animal shelter and vent on the unadoptables. But when I told him, each kill just makes me want to move on to something bigger, he smiled and asked if I'd ever volunteered at a soup kitchen. "Hey, I remember you," said our fertility doctor, and my stomach felt sick when I recognized him as my tormentor from high school. I tried not to bear a grudge and keep an open mind, but that was until I saw that my child looked just like him, along with several of his other patients' kids in town. My wife died when our daughter was 5 years old. "Get dressed, we're gonna visit Mommy," I said to my daughter, as I try my best not to laugh whilst loading the shotgun. "The good news," the doctor said, "is that your daughter's brain tumor is operable. The bad news is the cancer is attached to her optic nerves, so we need to remove her eyes." I received a text from my best friend saying, "Help, I'm locked in the basement." When I rushed to their house, I found them waiting for me outside, pale and trembling, insisting they never sent the message. "I'm so close," I thought, as my fingers slipped inside my body. The doctor had promised no side effects from the new medication, but my bones have been itchy ever since I started it. TwoSentencHorror. As the leader of a survivor group during zombie apocalypse, I decided not to take the guy in the wheelchair with us. But I did decide to take the wheelchair with us, once I discovered that it was solar power assisted and could go up to 10 mph. "I wonder what's taking so long," I said out loud, finally deciding to head down to the cellar. I saw my family laying down amongst the potatoes for a nap, so I decided to hide in the room and scare them when they woke up. Immortal youth, not immortality. As I lost my ability to see, hear, and move my body over time with old age, I never stopped wishing that I had been more specific in my request to the genie. Your memories from when you were a baby and toddler are not gone. They're just not accessible. Going by what my parents, uncles, and aunts have told me about those really early years, I'm extremely grateful that those memories are safely locked away.